Thank you, Fran, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great that you're able to take some time out of your busy day and join us for this webinar, so we really do appreciate it. I'd also just at this stage like to thank the Supplier Development Programme for arranging and facilitating today's webinar, so thanks to Fran and Elizabeth. Today's session will focus on procurement strategies and annual procurement reports, and over the course of the next hour and a half, we're going to provide an opportunity to summarise the legislative requirements, explain how and when bodies should notify Scottish ministers about publication of a 2025-2026 procurement strategy and annual procurement report. We're going to outline some of the benefits of a procurement strategy and annual procurement report. We'll review the highlights of the recently published annual report on procurement activity in Scotland 2023 to 2024. And we'll give an overview of the major themes along with some general feedback from the analysis that was completed from Public Bodies 2023 to 2024 annual procurement reports. We'll also discuss some changes that we have made to the Annex A data template, which will take effect for the 2026 to 2027 annual procurement reports. So as I say, we set aside an hour and 30 minutes. We might use a little bit less than that. We'll see how we go, but then we will leave time at the end. There will be plenty of time for you to provide some comments and ask any questions that you may have. And as Fran explained, as we go along, we'll ask a few polling questions as well. So just be ready for those. Any questions that you do ask us will help to inform a Q&A response, which we'll send out to you in due course. So we'll collate all your questions, we'll get you the answers, and we'll send them out to everybody who took part in today's webinar. So before we continue, I'd like to run the first of these 4 polls, and I'll hand over to Elizabeth at this point.
That's great. Okay, everyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the first poll. If you can indicate in the chat bar if you're not seeing that, what I can do is pop it into the chat also. A few of our colleagues on Tuesday system was blocking the polling option. So if you can just indicate if there's any issues with that in the chat bar. Okay, so we're launching the first question. How easy or difficult do you find the process in preparing your annual procurement report? The options should be on screen and you can just vote. That's great. We've got a few votes coming in, so I'll just give that a minute or two to slow us down.
Is it that?
Okay. Okay, so we asked how easy or difficult did you find the process of preparing your annual procurement report? So 47% of our participants on today said neither easy nor difficult. 28% found it difficult. 6% found it easy, and 19% didn't know.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. That's interesting. Thank you for taking part in that poll, everybody. It's interesting to hear those results. This information just helps us to help you. It'd be good to know, perhaps you could drop comments into chat or comment at the end when we've got some time for question and answer. It'd be good to get some feedback from those who do find the process difficult. Where do you find the particular difficulties? As I say, this might help us to help you in the future. For now, we'll move on to the next set of slides. So we'll begin the session by recapping on the legislative framework. And I recognise that we've got a mix of participants in today's session. Some of you will no doubt be very experienced in producing a strategy and an annual procurement report, but it may be that some of you are doing so for the first time. So I hope that the more experienced don't mind me covering the basics. The Procurement Reform Scotland Act 2014 places a number of requirements on individual contracting authorities that support increased transparency and greater openness. For the purposes of this afternoon, we will focus on those sections within the 2014 Act that relate specifically to procurement strategies and annual procurement reports. Part 2 of the Procurement Reform Scotland Act 2014, I'll call it, if it's okay, the 2014 Act from here on in. That covers general duties and procurement strategies. This imposes general duties of equal treatment, non-discrimination, transparency and proportionality. Provision is also made for a sustainable procurement duty imposed upon contracting authorities. Part 2 of the 2014 Act also makes provisions for the preparation and publication of procurement strategies and annual reports by certain contracting authorities. Importantly, the 2014 Act states that a contracting authority which expects to have significant procurement expenditure in the next financial year must, before the start of that year, prepare a procurement strategy, setting out how the authority intends to carry out regulated procurements, review its procurement strategy for the current financial year, and make such revisions to it as the authority considers appropriate. We'll talk about the definition of significant procurement expenditure later in this webinar. Where an organisation already has an existing procurement strategy, there will be no requirement for it to prepare a completely new procurement strategy each year. An organisation must, however, at the very least review its strategy annually and make such revisions as it considers appropriate for the purposes of the 2014 Act. The 2014 Act also requires a contracting authority which is obliged to prepare or revise a procurement strategy in relation to a financial year to then prepare and publish an annual procurement report on its regulated procurement activities as soon as reasonably practical after the end of its financial year. Based on previous years, it is reasonable to expect an annual procurement report to be published no later than 6 months following the end of the organisation's reporting year. I should emphasise that the strategy and annual procurement report must be published on the internet. Section 19 of the 2014 Act requires contracting authorities to notify Scottish ministers of publication of their annual report. And this can be done by sending an email to annualprocurementreport@gov.scot. So that's all one word, annualprocurementreport@gov.scot, with a link to where the annual procurement report can be accessed. Now, if you didn't catch that email address, it can also be found in one of our Scottish Procurement Policy Notes, SPPN 1 2026. A contracting authority with procurement expenditure of less than £5 million on its regulated procurements in the financial year, whilst not legally required, is encouraged to publish a procurement strategy and report against it as a matter of good practice. And we are greatly encouraged by the growing number of contracting authorities who are recognising the benefits of having a strategy and an annual procurement report and are producing one, although not legally required to do so. There is no one-size-fits-all approach for strategies and annual procurement reports, and that is because a contracting authority's procurement strategy and report will be shaped by the organisation's broader objectives, its priorities, and what it buys. That is why there will be some expected variation in both strategies and annual procurement reports. The 2014 Act therefore simply sets out in section 15.5 and 18.2 what as a minimum each procurement strategy and annual procurement report must contain. And that is also why we took a conscious decision not to be overly prescriptive in relevant guidance. We did, however, establish an Annex A data template to help provide a degree of consistency in reporting. So, turning firstly to the minimum content of a procurement strategy. A clear, comprehensive and effective procurement strategy has an important place. It underpins a contracting authority's strategic plan and it provides a strategic focus for its procurement activities. It provides clarity about how a contracting authority will contribute to carrying out its procurement functions and the achievement of its purposes, whilst delivering value for money. The strategy must confirm how the authority will ensure its regulated procurements will be carried out with the general duties and the sustainable procurement duty. And compliance with the sustainable procurement duty may also aid compliance with other legislation that places specific requirements on the contracting authority with respect to its procurement activities, such as, for example, equality and climate legislation. A procurement strategy must also include statements of an authority's policy on a number of other matters, such as its approach to food procurement. Public expenditure on food has the potential to unlock benefits for community health, well-being and social justice through access to good nutrition, including access to fresh and seasonal produce, and market, employment and training opportunities in this key sector where there are a high number of SMEs. Another requirement is prompt payment of suppliers and subcontractors in the supply chain. Another minimum requirement, community benefit requirements, payment of the real living wage, and procurement of fairly and ethically traded goods and services. So I have picked out just a few of the requirements detailed on the slide and in section 15.5 of the 2014 Act. More details about what should be included in a strategy are in the procurement journey. You can look in the Scottish Government's procurement journey on gov.scot, and you will see there's a page on procurement strategy and annual procurement reports, and you'll find information there, and also in section 2 of the statutory guidance, which is published under the 2014 Act. So I'm going to pause there for a minute, and we'll take the second of our poll questions, and I'll hand over to Elizabeth again.
Thanks, Kenny. Okay, so now Scottish Government would like to ask, how easy or difficult do you find the process of preparing your procurement strategy? If you can just pop your poll for us. Just give that a wee few moments for people to finish off. Okay. Okay, so we're getting some chat saying some people can't see the polls. So I'm going to pop that into the chat bar also. It should pop up on your screen. So I put that in.
Might be worth just clicking on the apps. It should have automatically happened for you guys. It did happen on Tuesday automatically, but click on the apps at the bottom of your screen, round about your clock area, and see if that maybe prompts Slido.
That's great, thank you. That's great, there's a few more coming in now. Stop it there. Okay, so we asked how easy or difficult did you find the process of preparing your procurement strategy? 38% found it neither easy or difficult. 26% found it difficult. 24% said they didn't know. 6% found it difficult, and 6% of our results found it easy.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you all for participating in that poll. Again, it's interesting to see the spread of results. We will take a look at that. Again, if you can provide us with any more information, just by perhaps dropping your comments into chat or at the end of this call on where you find areas of difficulty, and we can take a look at that. So, to move on. Having looked at the minimum requirements of a procurement strategy, let's take a look at the minimum requirements in an annual procurement report. So, where a procurement strategy is a means to illustrate procurement's place within a contracting authority and the importance of procurement to successful delivery of wider organisational objectives, the annual procurement report provides a chance to demonstrate how procurement has contributed to the achievement of those specific objectives. Section 18.2 of the 2014 Act sets out what an annual procurement report must contain. A contracting authority is required to publish a summary of regulated procurements completed during the year. This will be helpful in demonstrating that the contracting authority is acting in a transparent manner and highlighting its procurement activity during the course of the year. In its review of whether these procurements complied with the authority's procurement strategy, it should also include, for example, details of how its procurement activity achieved the policies set out in the strategy, how these contributed to its wider organisational aims and objectives, and highlight any other positive impacts resulting from its procurement strategy. To the extent that any regulated procurements did not comply, a contracting authority should consider including information on how improvement activities will address identified shortfalls and how these will be monitored and reported. The annual procurement report should demonstrate how community benefits in public procurement contribute towards achieving the aims of the sustainable procurement duty. Details of how public bodies are increasing access to public contracts should be included in an annual procurement report as well. Doing this effectively can promote inclusive growth by giving greater opportunities to SMEs, the third sector, and supported businesses. Acting in a transparent and proportionate manner is an effective way by which a contracting authority can encourage competition and achieve better value for money in its procurements. Whilst it is acknowledged that at the time a contracting authority prepares its annual procurement report, it's unlikely to know what its precise requirements will be over the course of the next 2 financial years, it should be in a position to provide a brief forward plan of anticipated procurements, including planned contract extensions. The supplementary guidance sets out the information that must be provided within that summary. We are conscious that we need to balance the need for contracting authorities to publish their annual procurement reports with a need to avoid unnecessary burden. This supplementary guidance and template that is embedded within the procurement journey and in section 2 of the statutory guidance under the 2014 Act contains further information in relation to the minimum content. This next slide helps you moving on from the minimum requirements now. This next slide helps to lay out the context of procurement reporting. At a contract level, contract and supplier management ensures the successful delivery of contracts. A contracting authority's own annual procurement report is a shop window for public procurement within that organisation, informed by, among other things, the delivery of individual contracts. Similarly, the Scottish Minister's annual report on procurement activity will be viewed by many as the shop window for public procurement across Scotland at a national level. It provides a snapshot of activity informed by an analysis of individual annual procurement reports published by contracting authorities, as well as other relevant information. So I've spoke for a little while now about the requirements of a strategy and annual procurement report, and we've spoken about the minimum content, but there are clear benefits, and we should talk about the benefits as well. So this slide covers some of the benefits of having a procurement strategy and an annual procurement report. As I mentioned earlier, documenting a procurement strategy can help with planning and increase transparency. It also provides a better basis for engagement with stakeholders, removing unnecessary inconsistencies. An annual procurement report offers a contracting authority the opportunity to set out what has been achieved and to publicise its performance in delivering its procurement strategy. It provides an opportunity for organisations to demonstrate to their stakeholders that the procurement spend is being used to best effect to achieve better public services, good economic, social and environmental outcomes, delivery of local and national policies, for example, those relating to tackling inequality and meeting climate change obligations. An annual procurement report is a great way to celebrate an organisation's achievements and to demonstrate the real positive impact of its procurement activity to stakeholders and end users of the services it delivers. We are finding that suppliers are often aware of public body strategies and annual procurement reports. The Scottish Government ran a survey of suppliers in autumn 2024, and when we analysed the results of that survey, we found a high level of awareness being reported. Suppliers use the strategies and reports to learn more about the contracting authority. So that's the first part of today's webinar, where we looked at some of the legislative framework, the requirements of having a strategy and a report, and we looked at some of the benefits. What I'd like to do now is move on to the next slide and the next section and talk about what we sometimes call the Minister's Report, or to give it its full title, the Annual Report on Procurement Activity in Scotland. On March the 11th, we published the 7th Annual Report on Procurement Activity in Scotland, and the report provides an overview of public procurement activity for the financial year 2023 to 2024. The report highlights how public procurement activity supports the public services which contribute to the economic, social and environmental well-being of Scotland's people and communities. And for the first time this year, we also published the social research analysis of individual annual procurement reports submitted by contracting authorities, as conducted by our research agency, The Lines Between, and you will see that analysis referred throughout the Scottish Minister's Report. The data in the report draws from the 125 annual procurement reports which were submitted to us in time, and the 107 public bodies who submitted procurement data to the Scottish Procurement Information Hub. It's important to emphasise that although the report by Scottish ministers draws from individual annual procurement reports, it does not in any shape or form contain an assessment of the performance of individual authorities. Each and every contracting authority is responsible for ensuring its procurement activity complies with relevant legislation, and that the decisions it takes in the context of its procurement activity are in accordance with the legislation and its own strategic objectives. So the Minister's Report, the annual report, does not attempt to provide any kind of a commentary or assessment on that. Moving on to the next slide, I'll just take you through some of you may be familiar with this report and already read the report, or at least read the highlights. If you haven't, I would encourage you to do so. It really does, it really does highlight and emphasise the power of procurement in Scotland. And I'll just give you some of the numbers just to get evidence that impact. So, similar to previous reports, the 7th Annual Report of Procurement Activity in Scotland highlights how Scottish public bodies' procurement activities continue to deliver the goods, works and services that the people of Scotland use every single day. The total public procurement spend recorded in the hub, that's the Procurement Information Hub, in 2023-2024 was £17.5 billion. And of that, £9.5 billion was with suppliers in Scotland. That's those suppliers who have a Scottish registered address. Our Public Contract Scotland data tells us that 17,310 suppliers were awarded contracts in the 2023 to 2024 financial year. And of those, 71.5% were Scottish-based, 78.2% were SMEs, and 60.7% were Scottish SMEs. 124 public bodies' annual procurement reports contained information on the total number of regulated procurements awarded during the financial year. A combined total of 5,819 regulated contracts were awarded by those public bodies. The reporting year also saw significant milestones for public procurement, including the launch of the Public Procurement Strategy for Scotland, which was in April 2023. That strategy was developed by the Public Procurement Group, and it provides a clear vision and focused direction, putting public procurement at the heart of a sustainable economy to maximise value for the people of Scotland. it's expected that the national strategy will be reflected in individual procurement strategies and annual procurement reports published by contracting authorities in Scotland. If I move on to the next slide to keep talking about some of the impacts that we've reported on, over the year, the Scottish public sector continued to harness its procurement activity to generate a range of benefits for individuals and organisations across the country. As evidence of the positive impact of public procurement, it's estimated that the £17.5 billion of public procurement spend in Scotland and elsewhere reported to the Information Hub generates around £14.7 billion of economic activity in the wider Scottish economy and contributes around £7.8 billion to Scottish GDP. And it also supports around 120,000 full-time equivalent jobs. Now to drill a wee bit further down into some of these highlights, Scottish public sector procurement is good for businesses and their employees, and we can see that through some of the numbers. A total of £7.6 billion in public procurement spend with SMEs was reported to the Hub for the 2023 to 2024 financial year, where supplier size was known. Spend data reported to the Hub shows approximately 62 pence in every pound spent with suppliers based in Scotland went to an SME, where the supplier size and location was known. And an estimated £1.2 billion, or 13.1% of public procurement spend in Scotland reported to the Hub, went to third sector organisations during that reporting year. 111 public bodies' annual procurement reports contained information on the number of regulated contracts those public bodies had awarded, which included a scored Fair Work First criterion. 3,116 regulated contracts awarded by those organisations with such a criterion. And 122 public bodies' annual procurement reports contained information on the value of contracts awarded to supported businesses, showing a combined total of £22.1 million for both regulated and unregulated contracts was awarded to supported businesses by these public bodies. Next, we see that Scottish public sector procurement is good for places and communities. Where we could match Hub spend data to data on local deprivation, we found £3.5 billion went to suppliers in the 40% most deprived areas. Suppliers' registered address was known for £9.5 billion of the procurement spend in Scotland reported to the Hub. Of that, we see that £3.6 billion was procurement spend for the supplier, and the buy-in public body was located in the same local authority. Scottish public sector procurement is also good for society, and we see that in a couple of ways. Annual procurement reports provided examples of the ways in which public bodies are addressing environmental and climate change impacts in their procurement activities, for example. And then finally, Scottish public sector procurement is open and connected. 31 public bodies elected to produce an annual procurement report despite not reaching the £5 million threshold of spend on regulated procurements, which would require them to do so. And 108 annual procurement reports provided information on promoting innovation. So to sum this section up, overall, the annual procurement report and the annual procurement reports underline the importance of public bodies continuing to use all of the levers at their disposal to extract maximum economic, social, and environmental value from their procurement processes. I'm going to pause again now and hand back to Elizabeth for the next poll question.
That's great, Kenny. Thank you for that. Okay, so now we're wanting to know, does your organisation use the annual report on procurement activity in Scotland, and if so, how? Again, I'll pop it into the chat as well for anyone maybe not seeing these questions. Yeah, there's some people typing. Again, if you're not seeing it, it's in the chat, but also at the bottom right hand corner of the screen, there's 3 little boxes plus a plus sign. That's the apps panel possibly if you maybe click on that, it might pop back up for you. Okay, we've still got some people typing, that's great, thank you. That's great. So there's lots of information getting put in there. We're reading it all out, Kenny. We'll just collate that and send it along to you at the end. So there is a lot of people using yes and no's, and some detail getting put in there as well, and what other ways they're doing that.
That's great. Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks everybody for taking part in that poll. We'll take a look at your responses. Within the Scottish Government, we do frequently use the annual report on procurement activity in Scotland. We use it to provide information to our ministers and to stakeholders all across the Scottish Government and beyond. And we find it a really useful report, to demonstrate the real and positive impact that public procurement is bringing to the economy and to the people of Scotland. So I'll be interested to see if and how you are using that report. And for those who don't use it today, perhaps we can encourage you to take a look at the report and see how you perhaps could use that with your own stakeholders. So I'm just going to move on now to the next slide and to the next section. And I'm going to hand over at this point to my colleague, Martin.
Thanks, Kenny. Good afternoon, everyone. So this is the third section, as Kenny has outlined. So in this section, I'm going to talk about the changes to the Annex A data template. So although the Annex A data template is not mandated that it must be completed, when you consider the questions, these are all linked back to the legislation that contracting authorities must report back on within their annual procurement reports. The Annex A data template was developed following our experience of analysing individual annual procurement reports published during the first reporting cycle. Following feedback from heads of procurement, we will have provided a Word and an Excel version of the updated Annex A data template for the 2026-2027 financial year to enable contracting authorities to select their preferred format, as I said, either Microsoft Word or Excel. So in response to a recommendation by the Economy and Fair Work Committee following their review of the 2014 Act, the Scottish Government, in collaboration with cross-sector colleagues, undertook a review of the Annex A data template in 2025. The Annex A data template had never been reviewed since its introduction. It's key that we acknowledge the difficulties faced by some contracting authorities to obtain certain elements of the Annex A template. We have published 2 Scottish procurement policy notes, and I'll refer to these as SPPNs from now on. So last year, we published SPPN 2 of 25, which covered the 2025-2026 financial year period. Most recently, we have published SPPN 1 of 2026. So this provides notice of changes to the Annex A data template for the 2026 to 2027 annual procurement reports, and how a contracting authority should notify Scottish ministers of the publication of the procurement strategy and any procurement reports. This is what I'm now going to cover with you today. So just to emphasise, the Annex A data template included in SPPN 2 2025 should be used for the 2025-2026 annual procurement reports. So I'm going to quickly pass you back over to Liz to do another quick poll, just that we want to kind of find out about how you feel that your organisation will use the data template and in which format.
That's great, thanks Martin. Okay, so as Martin's just said, which Annex A data template file format are your organisations likely to use going forward from 26 to 27 reports? And the poll's been launched and your options there are Excel or Word. Again, I'll pop it into the chat for you. Okay, that's swing down there. Okay, Martin, so asking that question, what file format is going to be used going forward into 26-27? So it's Excel, 53% of our delegates today will be using Excel and 47% will be using Word.
Okay, thanks Elizabeth, thanks for that. And again, thank you for everyone for giving us this idea how you're going to respond to it. That's good for us, just for us to think how we're going to resource wise and how we're going to analyse it all. Now, before I go through the actual changes to the Annex A template, I'd like to draw your attention to a section of the SPPN where we have provided additional clarification. The previous SPPNs stated that contracting authorities with an expected annual procurement spend of 5 million or more on regulated procurements are required to prepare and publish a procurement strategy or revise an existing strategy. We have further clarified this to emphasise the definition provided in the legislation. The 2014 Act states that a contracting authority has significant procurement expenditure in a year if the sum of the estimated values of the contracts to which its regulated procurements in that year relates to is equal to or greater than 5 million. So now let's talk about the changes to the Annex A data template that we've got for 2026 to 2027. Section 3 of the data template is your area for review of regulated procurement compliance. So during our review of the Annex A data template, we found there was a level of ambiguity and subjectiveness in responses to this matrix in its current form. A quantitative matrix does not allow for the inclusion of the rationale used, and a quantitative approach allows for greater detail and broader content to be provided was deemed to be more suitable. This section has therefore been changed to a yes/no question with a narrative box to better enable contracting authorities to provide a reason for determining why any procurements do not comply within your strategy. Now that could be something as simple as you have had to do a direct award because of something has came out unforeseen and you've directed awarded a contract, whereas you would have normally went out and run a procurement exercise. Section 4, community benefits, is an overall summary. So again, we acknowledge the difficulties faced by some contracting authorities to obtain this information. Rather than requesting that the total values of contracts, it was proposed during the review to soften the question to refer to only contracts above the threshold. So data from the Procurement Information Hub suggests a relatively low number, about 400 contracts across public sector in Scotland are indeed above the current threshold. Hence, because we're asking for it to be above, the burden on contracting authorities to gather and report this information. So it's better than you're reporting on the potential 400 contracts rather than all contracts. Elements H, I, and J in this section relate to subcontracting. Although only now requiring subcontracting information on above threshold contracts, the Annex A template included a text box to encourage the provision of any additional information under the threshold benefits secure, promoting good practices. So to better align to the Sustainable Procurement Duty in 2014 Act, we tidied up question Q4I, replacing social enterprise with third sector bodies. Now, you should be aware, the Scottish Government consulted on the Reform Act thresholds last year. So we have updated the guidance to note that the current £4 million threshold is under review. If a decision is made to revise the threshold, this will be communicated to contracting authorities who should thereafter use the revised threshold. Now going on to section 5, Fair Work and the Real Living Wage. An independent evaluation of fair work is being conducted from July 2025 to July 2026. The scope includes assessing if fair workforce policy has achieved its aims, the impacts in public sector contracts with regards to fair workforce criteria, implementation, and monitoring and reporting. 3 surveys were issued to buyers, employers, and workers. As a result, we haven't made any changes to the Fair Work section of Annex A. We decided not to change the Fair Work First questions in Annex A until the findings of that evaluation are published, and we will then determine if any changes to the Fair Work section is necessary. Section 6, Prompt Payments. So to further address the issues of late payments to suppliers, we have strengthened prompt payment reporting. An additional question has been added to report the number and the value of contracts which include the standardised statement associated with question 4C4 of the single procurement document. We already understand this information is readily available in some contracting authorities, so those who can gather that information should do so. We have also included a new matrix of value of invoices paid late by contracting authorities to suppliers, which complements the existing question of percentage of invoices paid on time. Now, section 7, the new layout, we have basically tidied that up and reformatted it to simplify the layout and group similar types of information together. There were some inconsistencies in the previous Annex A data template regarding information collected on SMEs, third sector bodies, and supported businesses. The updated Annex A data template standardises this information and how it's collected. In addition to asking in section 2 for the number and value of regulated contracts awarded overall, the updated Annex A now breaks this down by SME, third sector bodies and supported businesses in the now section 7, 8 and 9. In addition to asking in section 2 how many unique suppliers are awarded a place on a regulated contract overall, the updated Annex A breaks this into section 7, 8 and 9 to determine how many unique suppliers are SMEs, third sector bodies and the supported businesses. Spend data has been grouped together in an updated section 10. Now, Scottish Government gets asked a lot why we don't have a one source platform that provides all this information. We currently have the hub, and you may be aware that the Scottish Government is in the process of procuring a replacement for Public Contracts Scotland. However, I can't go into too much detail because this is a current live procurement exercise. What I can tell you is Scottish Government MI team is in the process of developing and piloting an Annex A data automation tool, and will be beginning engagement with interesting contracting authorities in the coming months. So you may be get emails from colleagues from that side of Scottish Government asking you for your input and feedback. Now, what I will do, that is my section on the Annex A changes to the Annex A for, and I can't stress enough, these are for the 2026 to 2027 period. And now I will pass you over to my colleague Colin, who will take you through the next the final section of the presentation.
Thank you, Martin. So there we are. To help inform the annual report on procurement activity in Scotland, which my colleague Kenny mentioned earlier, which we also call the Minister's Report, the social research agency, The Lines Between, was commissioned to review, analyse and report on public bodies' annual procurement reports and strategies over the 3 financial years of 2023 to 2024, 2024 to 2025, and 2025 to 2026. The analysis of those annual procurement reports published by yourselves enables us to provide a comprehensive overview of procurement activity and to illustrate how public procurement continues to contribute to a variety of economic, social, and environmental benefits for businesses and communities across Scotland. We already heard a summary of the highlights of the recently published 2023 to 2024 Minister's Report. In this part of the session, we will be providing an overview of the comprehensiveness of annual procurement reports and strategies and identify some suggestions for improvements. We will also provide overall observations on the progress on these reports, new themes emerging in reporting, and areas for yourselves to consider in future reporting cycles. So, to begin with, this slide shows the changes we're implementing for the feedback we provide on your reports and strategies. In the last of these webinar sessions, which was held in July 2024, we received questions about how some of the criteria, which are listed on the left-hand side, were assessed. We made the changes, which you can see on the right, essentially because we want to present you with specific, meaningful, and robust feedback, while avoiding more subjective assessments such as high, medium, or low quality, which we've had in the past. The key change that we're focused on more is the completeness and level of detail provided on each of the minimum requirements listed in legislation and guidance. And we've simplified the more subjective aspects of that quality assessment and moved those to written feedback rather than using a scaled score. It's also worth pointing out that all public bodies who submit an annual procurement report will receive feedback on their report. However, we are only able to provide this feedback if we receive a timely annual procurement report submission and publication. As stated earlier, based on previous years, it's reasonable to expect an annual procurement report to be published no later than 6 months from the end of your organization's financial year. We find that a number of public bodies are unable to meet this timeline and risk missing the cutoff for inclusion in the Minister's Report. We therefore encourage you to plan APR development and approval and publication to take place wherever possible within this 6-month window. So next slide, please. Thank you. To begin with, one of the public bodies, out of the public bodies that provided their annual procurement reports, 93 or 75% reported a regulated procurement spend exceeding £5 million, which would mandate them to provide an annual procurement report and strategy. This also means that 31 public bodies, or 25% of those who received, had total regulated contract values below £5 million, yet still submitted an annual procurement report, despite not being obliged to do so by the Act. All public bodies met at least some of the minimum requirements in both the strategies and annual procurement reports. In the past, we've often seen a few strategies or reports not meet any minimum requirements, so we consider this to be a very positive thing. 54% of public bodies met all of the minimum requirements in their strategies, and further, 86% met all of the minimum requirements in their reports, as you can see. So the majority of both strategies and annual procurement reports addressed all of the general duties. Strategies had slightly better coverage overall, with 5% difference in equal treatment and non-discrimination, and a 6%, that's a rounded figure, difference for proportionality. Still, these figures are mostly higher than what we've observed in previous reporting periods. 89% of annual procurement reports included evidence of fulfilling the transparency duty in 22 to 23, compared with 96%, as you can see, for 23 to 24. And looking a bit further back, 80% of annual procurement reports in 2021 to 2022 included evidence of fulfilling the duty of equal treatment and non-discrimination, compared with the 93%, which you can see for the 2023 to 2024 period. So our analysts, our contracted analysts at the lines between, noted in their assessments that there was often little difference in the approaches described in annual procurement reports and strategies to engaging with SMEs, third sector organizations, and supported businesses. Similarly, coverage of fair work practices across annual procurement reports and strategies usually or often focused on living wage policies. Our contracted analysts found that there was limited coverage of other activities related to fair work. This means that there was limited coverage of the other aspects of fair work. These included channels for effective workers' voice, family-friendly working practices, and zero-hour contract policies. While a higher proportion of public bodies submitted a dated template for this year, it's about 98% of those received, or 122 of 125 total. Then in the previous year, where that figure was close to 90%. Gaps in the dated templates submitted were still evident, with a high percentage of blank entries or omissions in certain areas. The Annex A dated template helps to provide consistency in reporting data, as my colleague Martin discussed earlier, and we are keen to understand why there's any gaps in this reporting. On the second point, some of the questions in the data template that had a low response rate included the two questions you can see here, which are listed as 8E and 8G. In the Annex A, related to cash savings and non-cash savings. Apologies. Similarly, we encourage all organizations to complete a data template, and whilst recognizing capacity and system limitations, we encourage you to strive to plug whatever gaps, plug gaps wherever possible. We could explore facilitating best practice sessions so that these public bodies who have difficulty in reporting certain elements can learn from those that are currently able to do so. So, reports were considered to align to their strategies if they focused on the same priorities. if the content of their report overlap with the content of the strategies, and if there are references to the strategy throughout the report. 62% of annual procurement reports were considered to align with their strategies. This is comparable with previous years. 65% of strategies and reports were considered to align in 2020 to 2021. 63% were considered to align in 2021 to 2022, and 59% were considered to align in 2022 to 2023. So this past year was roughly comparable with those previous periods. Several annual procurement reports. Next slide. Thank you. Several annual procurement reports provided evidence of public bodies using artificial intelligence to promote efficiencies and improvements in their service. This is a new development over the past reporting year. Many public bodies reflected on challenges related to inflation, global conflicts, and cybersecurity risks, and how these are affecting their contractors, budgets, and procurement processes. We know that the global situation is becoming more challenging, and public bodies are spending more time and managing and mitigating such challenges. And I will hand it back to Kenny.
Thank you, Colin. So that brings us to the end of the 4 sections within today's webinar. Just before we summarise, let's just look at some sources of guidance and support which are available to you. So the statutory guidance comprises a number of chapters which covers procurement strategies and annual reports, the sustainable procurement duty, community benefit requirements in procurement, selection of tenderers and award of contracts, procurement for health or social care services. Then you have the procurement journey. It is intended to support all levels of procurement activity, and embedded within it is supplementary guidance and templates for procurement strategies and annual procurement reports. And you can find the procurement journey, if you don't know what it is, it's at www.procurementjourney.scot. The Public Procurement Strategy for Scotland is another resource which is available to you. As mentioned earlier, it provides the high-level vision, roadmap and strategic objectives against which all public bodies can align. As Colin spoke about, we encourage sharing experience and good practice. And one of the obvious ways to do that is to go and look at other contracting authorities and your procurement reports. It's sometimes good to do a little bit of benchmarking and comparison. So, let's just quickly recap on some of the things to consider when developing your annual procurement report. Does your report align with your most up-to-date procurement strategy? Does it meet the minimum content required by the 2014 Act in a way that is meaningful to the reader? Have you gone further than the minimum requirements? Does it highlight the extent of your public procurement activity within the reported period? And does your report demonstrate a commitment to continuous improvement? Does it show how your public procurement activity supports your broader aims and objectives? Those are all things that you can consider. So that brings us to the close of the formal part of the session. I'll just move on to the next slide, and perhaps for now we can stop the recording, Elizabeth, and we can take any questions that you might